Jimin asks, "You still think of Taehyung?" But Jungkook's shocking, brutal reply in front of everyone changes everything they thought they knew. "You still think of Taehyung?" Jimin's voice cracked in the middle of the rehearsal room, trembling just enough to silence the laughter around them. The question wasn't meant for the crowd, but everyone froze, stylists, staff, dancers, all suspended in the gravity of that sentence. Jungkook, mid-laugh, mid-step, mid-movement, stopped. His eyes didn't flicker. His shoulders didn't drop. He just stood there, staring straight ahead as if he hadn't heard it or had heard it 1,000 times before. The silence stretched thin. Then slowly he turned. His voice came low and hard. "Do you want the real answer or the one that'll let you sleep tonight?" The room went stiller if that was possible. Jimin's breath caught in his throat. His body swayed slightly like the truth might knock him over before it was even spoken. Jungkook walked closer, the lights above buzzed. Outside, a truck honked in the Seoul afternoon traffic. No one dared move. "I don't think of him," Jungkook said, his jaw tight. "Because forgetting someone you once trusted with everything isn't something you do in thoughts, it's something you bleed." He walked past Jimin without a glance, grabbing his jacket, his duffel bag like nothing had happened. Jimin didn't turn to follow him. He just stood, frozen in the center of the room, drowning in the echo of what wasn't said. It was the beginning of something unraveling, something they had all held too tightly for too long. Ready for next episode? Let me know and I'll continue episode 2 in the same immersive, cinematic style. Jimin barged into the stairwell, his breath sharp and ragged, chest heaving like he'd been running though he hadn't moved much since Jungkook walked out. His hand hit the cold metal railing, hard enough to sting, but the pain meant nothing compared to the boiling confusion in his chest. "You don't get to say something like that and walk away," he hissed to himself, barely noticing a junior staffer skitter away down the hall after catching his glare. Minutes later, he stormed into the underground parking lot, the fluorescent lights casting a pale, almost sickly hue over everything. Jungkook was leaning against his car, phone in one hand, unreadable expression on his face. "Say it again," Jimin demanded, his voice louder this time, echoing against the concrete. Jungkook didn't flinch. He slid his phone into his pocket and pushed off the car slowly. "You want to keep doing this?" he asked, tone deceptively calm. "Then fine, let's do it." "You want honesty? I never stopped thinking about him." Jimin's mouth parted, no sound came out. "I still think about him when we perform, when we eat, when we pass the dorm hallway where his room used to be, when you look at me like you're trying to replace his shadow with your body." "That's not fair," Jimin started, voice cracking. "Isn't it?" Jungkook snapped. "You asked me, you poked at a scar and now you're mad it bled." Jimin stepped forward, fists trembling at his side. "Do you think this is easy for me? Being the one who stayed, who kept trying, who watched you break down over him while pretending I didn't exist. Do you know how humiliating it is to always be the second name in your story?" Jungkook's gaze turned colder. "Don't act like you're some victim here. You knew what it was from the beginning. You walked in with your eyes wide open, didn't you?" "I walked in because I believed you," Jimin's voice echoed with anguish. "Because you said you moved on. Because I thought," he cut off, breath hitching, "I thought I could be enough." For a second there was silence again. Jungkook looked down, eyes flickering like something inside him had cracked but refused to show. "You want to be enough," he said quietly, "but the truth is, even Taehyung wasn't. That's the cruel part." Jimin staggered slightly as if the words had hit him across the face. "Then what are we doing?" he whispered. "What the hell have we been doing all this time?" "Trying to outrun ghosts," Jungkook muttered, "pretending grief can be kissed away." A security guard opened the door to the garage but immediately backed out when he saw the tension hanging in the air. Jungkook turned to leave but Jimin grabbed his wrist. "Why won't you let go of him?" Jungkook's eyes blazed. "Because no one else ever made me feel like he did." The silence was deafening. Jimin released him like the skin burned. His voice was barely audible. "Not even me." "Especially not you," Jungkook said without blinking. Then he walked away. Jimin stood there, the taste of betrayal sharp in his mouth, his heart fraying at the edges. Behind him, a light flickered in the garage ceiling, blinking like a warning no one had read in time. "Say it again to my face if you really mean it." Jimin's voice tore through the hallway outside the practice studio the next evening, loud enough that it pierced through the closed doors and made 2 backup dancers freeze mid-step inside. Jungkook didn't even flinch. He stood with his back against the wall, arms crossed, face calm in that infuriating way that made Jimin want to scream. "I don't repeat things I don't regret," Jungkook said flatly, not even bothering to look at him. "But you came looking for me again, didn't you? Because you don't get to humiliate me in front of half the staff and then pretend like it never happened," Jimin fired back, voice shaking with fury. "I've protected you for years, Jungkook, covered for you, lied for you, and that's what you throw in my face." Jungkook finally turned, his gaze sharp and unreadable. "Protected me," he repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "No, Jimin, you protected yourself. You didn't lie for me, you lied because you were scared if people knew the truth, they'd see I was never really yours." Jimin's jaw clenched. "You were mine, you said it, you said you'd try." "And I did," Jungkook said, voice rising slightly. "I tried so hard I forgot who I was for a while. I kissed you with his name still stuck between my teeth. I smiled at you hoping it would feel like how he made me smile. I told myself you were what I needed because the alternative was being alone with the emptiness he left behind. Do you know what it's like to lie to your own heart every single day?" Jimin stepped forward, the air between them thick with years of unsaid pain. "Do you think I don't feel that too? You're not the only one who's grieving. You're not the only one who lost him." That stopped Jungkook. His lips parted slightly, the fire in his eyes flickering into something softer, something raw. "Then why didn't you ever say it?" he whispered. "Why did you pretend like it didn't hurt you when he left?" Jimin's voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to be weak in front of you. I thought if I stayed strong, maybe you'd stop looking for him in everyone else. Maybe you'd finally see me." "I saw you," Jungkook said quietly, "but I couldn't stop seeing him too." Jimin's face crumbled, but he forced himself not to cry. "Not here, not in front of him again. What do you want from me?" he asked, voice hoarse. "To walk away?" "No," Jungkook said, stepping closer, almost too close. "I want you to stop waiting for me to become someone I'm not. I want you to stop hopping 'I'll love you the way you deserve' when my heart's still stuck somewhere I can't reach." "So this is it?" Jimin asked. "After everything?" Jungkook looked down, then back up, and this time his voice was barely a breath. "This should have never started." The words hung heavy like smoke in a burning room. Jimin didn't say anything else. He walked past Jungkook slowly, each step a struggle, each breath a war. Behind him, Jungkook closed his eyes, fists clenched, the taste of regret burning worse than any fire. From the far end of the hallway, a door creaked open. A familiar voice echoed quietly, cautiously. "Is this really how it ends for you too?" Jungkook's head snapped up. Taehyung stood there, arms folded, eyes dark, unreadable. Neither of them moved. The past had finally walked back into the present, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hallway thickened with a silence so suffocating it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Taehyung's presence hit Jungkook like a wave of ice down his spine, unexpected, undesired, unavoidable. He hadn't seen him in months, maybe a year, not since the last message Jungkook never replied to, not since the last call Jungkook let ring and die. And yet here he was, leaning against the doorway like nothing had changed when everything had. "Why are you here?" Jungkook asked, voice lower than he intended, almost a growl. Taehyung's eyes narrowed, arms still crossed. "I could ask the same thing, because from what I heard you've been saying my name a lot lately." Jimin didn't move. His breath hitched. And he turned slowly, eyes darting between the two of them like he'd just stepped into a room full of exposed wires. "You're not supposed to be here," Jungkook continued, stepping forward, fury bubbling just beneath the surface. "You gave that up, remember?" Taehyung didn't flinch. "I didn't give it up, I gave you space. There's a difference." "No," Jungkook snapped. "You walked away and left a crater in my life, and now you show up like you didn't destroy everything." "Destroy?" Taehyung echoed, pushing off the door. "You want to talk about destruction? Let's talk about the night you said you loved me and disappeared the next morning like it meant nothing." Jimin turned pale, his lips parted but no words came out. Jungkook's voice cracked with restrained rage. "Don't you dare spin it like you were the victim. You said it first and then you made me a secret. You were ashamed." Taehyung's jaw tensed, something dangerous flickering in his gaze. "I wasn't ashamed of you. I was terrified of losing everything. The band, the fans, my family. You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "I gave you everything," Jungkook shouted, stepping forward until they were chest to chest. "And you made me feel like a mistake." Jimin finally spoke, voice trembling. You told me you hated him. Both Jungkook and Taehyung turned, eyes wide. Jimin stared at Jungkook, pain etched across his features like a sculpture breaking apart. You said it didn't matter anymore. That I wasn't a replacement. You kissed me after telling me he broke you. Jungkook opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Jimin's voice rose with emotion. You lied to me, to yourself, to everyone, and now he's here and suddenly nothing else matters again, does it? Jimin, Jungkook began, but Taehyung cut in. No, let him talk. Jimin laughed bitterly, eyes glossy. Talk? You want me to talk? Fine. Do you know what it feels like to watch someone slowly erase you? Every day a little less affection, a little more distance. Until one morning he looks at you and you just know you were never the one. I begged myself not to see it, not to believe it. But it was always you, Taehyung, always. I didn't come here to ruin anything, Taehyung said quietly. I came because I heard what happened between you two, and because I knew he wouldn't tell me the truth unless I was standing in front of him. Jungkook's fists trembled. You don't get to walk in and pretend like you care. You forfeited that right. And you don't get to keep punishing people for loving you, Taehyung shot back. You loved me and then you left. He loved you and you lied. What are you running from, Jungkook? The words hit like thunder. Jungkook's breathing grew shallow. I'm not running, he whispered. I'm drowning. For a moment, no one spoke. The pain in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Taehyung stepped closer, his voice soft but piercing. Then stop dragging others down with you. Jungkook looked at Jimin, really looked at him, the broken curve of his shoulders, the unshed tears in his eyes, the hope that was dying even now. He reached a hand toward him, but Jimin stepped back. Don't, he said. Not now, not after this. Jungkook's hand froze midair. The three of them stood locked in a triangle of ruin, years of history bleeding into a single, unbearable moment. Outside, a storm had started, raindrops thundering against the windows like the world itself was screaming for resolution. But there would be none, not tonight. The rain pounded harder against the glass as if trying to drown out the tension still echoing in the hallway, but nothing could silence what had just been unleashed. Jungkook stood frozen, arm half raised, as Jimin stared at him with a mixture of pain, disbelief, and something far more dangerous, clarity. Taehyung didn't move either, but his eyes never left Jungkook's face, studying him like a stranger, like someone he used to know but no longer recognized. So this is who you became without me. Taehyung finally said, his voice low, almost too calm. A man who uses one heart to forget another. Jungkook's lips curled into something between a grimace and a bitter laugh. You really think this is about you? You really think you walk in here, stir up everything you ran from, and act like you're entitled to some righteous closure? I never asked for closure, Taehyung snapped, stepping forward. I came to remind you who you were before you turned into someone who throws people away like emotional bandages. Jimin flinched. Enough, he said quietly, then louder. Enough. The echo of his voice rang down the corridor, sharp and pained. I'm not going to stand here and be the emotional casualty in your unfinished war. He turned to Jungkook, eyes narrowed but glistening. I loved you. God, I loved you so much it hurt. And you knew that, you used it. You needed someone to hold the pieces of you together while you mourned him, and his voice broke, I let you. I told myself it was temporary, that if I stayed long enough, strong enough, maybe you'd see me, really see me, but you never looked at me without seeing him first. That's not true, Jungkook said immediately, his voice shaking for the first time that night. Then tell me what color my eyes are, Jimin challenged. Jungkook opened his mouth. Silence. Exactly, Jimin said, backing away. Because every time you looked at me, you were looking for someone else. You kissed me with his ghost on your lips. You touched me like you were chasing a memory. Do you know how that feels, to be haunted by someone who isn't even dead to you? He was never a ghost, Jungkook said hoarsely. He was the wound. And I was the bandage you kept ripping off, Jimin whispered, the truth finally burning through. Taehyung stood still, but his hands clenched tightly at his sides. Jungkook, I didn't come here to take you back, he said after a long pause. I came because I wanted to hear it from you, what we really meant. Was it ever real, or was I just the first person who made you feel alive and that scared the hell out of you? Jungkook met his gaze, and for the first time the armor cracked. You were the first person who ever made me feel seen, he said quietly. And that terrified me, because the moment I felt that, I knew I could lose everything. So you destroyed it before it could destroy you, Taehyung finished for him. Classic Jungkook. I didn't mean to hurt you, Jungkook said, the words sounding useless even to his own ears. But you did, Taehyung said, and then you hurt him too, so tell me who's left for you to ruin next. Don't act like you're innocent, Jungkook snapped. You left without a word, you disappeared, you ran. Because I was scared of what loving you would do to me, Taehyung confessed, his voice trembling now. Because you made me feel everything too deeply, too fast, and I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to love you without losing myself. Jimin looked between them, something sharp twisting in his chest. You both broke each other and left me to sweep up the mess, he said, and I let you, but not anymore. He stepped back, finally steadying his breath. I'm not your refuge. I'm not your replacement. I'm not a stand-in for a love story that imploded. I'm done. Jungkook took a step toward him, desperate. Jimin, don't, Jimin cut him off. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Save it for someone who still wants to believe you. He walked past both of them, not looking back, and the sound of his footsteps faded into the storm like the last thread snapping. Jungkook turned away, chest heaving, staring at the wall like it might give him answers. Taehyung stepped beside him but didn't speak. The silence between them this time was not just heavy, it was final. The days that followed were a blur of rehearsals, media obligations, and fake smiles that cracked the moment the cameras turned off. The energy in the practice room was icy, conversations clipped, and the air carried the weight of things unsaid. Jimin had stopped showing up to shared schedules, citing personal matters, though everyone around knew better. Jungkook hadn't texted, he hadn't called. Not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know what the hell he'd say that wouldn't just reopen the wounds already festering. He stayed late after one night's rehearsal, drenched in sweat, punching through choreography that no longer held meaning. His reflection in the mirror was a stranger, one who looked lost, worn down, hollow. He didn't hear the door open behind him. You look like you haven't slept in days, Taehyung's voice echoed softly, laced with an edge that wasn't concern, it was observation. Jungkook didn't turn. Maybe I haven't. That guilt looks good on you, Taehyung added, stepping further into the room. Fits better than the lies you used to wear. You really came here to throw daggers? Jungkook asked, voice rough. Because if so, get in line. I've got a whole damn arsenal pointed at me already. Taehyung shrugged, tossing his phone on a bench and folding his arms. No, I came to say something I should have said a long time ago. Jungkook finally turned, his eyes rimmed red. What, that you're sorry, that you didn't mean to run? No, Taehyung said, stepping forward. I'm not sorry for leaving, I'm sorry I didn't take you with me. Jungkook's breath caught. Don't. I loved you, Taehyung said more forcefully. Still do in some broken, twisted way. But I see you now, Jungkook. You're not just hurting, you're destroying. Everything you touch turns to ash because you keep waiting for someone to hand you forgiveness like a bandage, but forgiveness doesn't work that way. Jimin gave you everything, and you gave him your ghosts. Jungkook's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't mean to hurt him. But you did, Taehyung said, stepping even closer. And the worst part is, you hurt him trying to heal from me. That's not love, Jungkook. That's survival at someone else's expense. Don't talk to me about love, Jungkook snapped. You ran the second it got complicated. Because I knew I wasn't ready to love you the way you needed, Taehyung fired back. But I didn't pretend I could, you did, with Jimin. You lied to him every day you woke up beside him thinking about me. Jungkook's fists clenched. You think I didn't try. You think I didn't beg myself to let you go. You didn't let me go, Taehyung said. You buried me alive, and now you've done the same to him. A long pause. Jungkook's eyes glistened, but he held back the tears clawing to escape. Then what do I do now? He asked, voice cracking. How do I fix something when I'm the one who ruined it? Taehyung's gaze softened just enough to show the remnants of the love he once carried. You don't fix it, he said. You own it. You look Jimin in the eye and stop feeding him hope you can't live up to. You stop trying to mold your grief into a relationship. You let him breathe. And what about us? Jungkook asked, eyes desperate. There is no us, Taehyung said gently. There hasn't been for a long time. I came here because I needed to see if you were still fighting for something that died. But you're not. You're fighting yourself, and I can't be a part of that anymore. He turned to leave, picking up his phone, pausing at the door. Don't chase people hoping they'll fill your void, Jungkook. Learn to live with it. That's how healing starts. The door shut quietly behind him. Jungkook dropped to the floor, sweat and tears mixing on his face, chest heaving. He had never felt so heavy and so empty at once. In another building across town, Jimin stood in a radio booth, headphones on, waiting for the signal to go live. The producer smiled and pointed to him. The red light blinked on. "Hi, everyone," Jimin said, voice surprisingly steady. "I wasn't supposed to be here today, but some things can't wait. Some truths need to be said, especially when your heart's been used as collateral in someone else's unfinished story." The chat flooded instantly. The host looked panicked, but Jimin didn't stop. "So if you're listening and you know who you are, this is the last time I speak to your silence. I loved you, I waited, but I'm done mourning someone who's still alive." And with that, he removed the headphones, stood up, and walked out. The world outside was still raining, but for the first time in weeks he was. The audio clip from Jimin's unexpected radio appearance exploded across every platform within hours, trending worldwide before the sun even rose over Seoul. The words "mourning someone who's still alive" became the anthem of betrayal, of heartbreak, of quiet rage. And while the fans argued over its meaning, over who he meant, the people who truly understood it felt every syllable like a blade. Jungkook listened to it in his car, parked outside their old dorm, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Every time Jimin's voice cracked, he flinched. Every pause between his words echoed louder than any scream. The realization hit like a gut punch. Jimin hadn't just left the room days ago. He had left him. Finally, truly, completely. And the strange thing was, it felt deserved. Still, something inside Jungkook refused to sit with that. He stepped out of the car, into the bitter cold of morning, and walked. He didn't know where he was going until his feet took him straight to the entrance of Big Hit's building. He scanned in without thinking, ignoring the greetings, ignoring the whispers, ignoring everything but the single purpose pumping in his veins like blood. He found him in the rooftop lounge. Jimin was alone, wrapped in a gray hoodie, legs tucked against his chest on the outdoor couch, eyes staring out over the city skyline like he belonged somewhere else. "You could have warned me," Jungkook said, voice low, tense. Jimin didn't turn around. "Would it have changed anything?" "You humiliated me," Jungkook added, stepping forward. "You went on air and turned our pain into a performance." "You mean like how you turned me into an audience for your grief over Taehyung?" Jimin snapped, spinning to face him. "Don't talk to me about performances. I've been performing love for months, hopping one day you joined the scene instead of drifting through like a ghost." "That wasn't fair," Jungkook growled. "Neither was this," Jimin said, standing now, his voice sharp and unyielding. "But fairness died the day I realized I knew the sound of your nightmares better than your laugh. The day you started saying I'm tired instead of I love you. The day you said his name in your sleep while I was the one holding you." Jungkook flinched. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean not to," Jimin retorted. "That's the part you never say out loud. It was always convenient pain. You wanted to keep me close enough to feel safe but far enough to never have to choose." Jungkook stepped closer, eyes burning. "I didn't ask you to love me." "But you didn't stop me either," Jimin said, softer now, the ache rising. "And that's worse." They stood in silence, the cold wind biting at their skin, both trembling from something far deeper than temperature. Jungkook reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, creased and worn. He held it out. Jimin hesitated. "What is it?" "The letter I wrote to Taehyung the day he left," Jungkook said. "I never sent it, I couldn't, but maybe you should read it." "Why me?" Jimin asked warily. "Because you deserve to know what you were up against," Jungkook replied. "Not for closure, not for guilt, just truth." Jimin took it slowly, opening the pages, eyes scanning every line, and with each word his expression changed. Confusion, pain, disbelief. He looked up, voice hollow. "You told him you wait forever." "I thought I meant it," Jungkook whispered. "And then you came, and I realized forever isn't a promise, it's a prison. I tried to free myself. I thought you could be the key." "So I was your escape plan," Jimin said bitterly, handing back the letter. "You're making this worse, Jungkook." "I don't know how to make it better," Jungkook admitted, defeated. "Then don't," Jimin said. "Stop trying to fix what you shattered with 1,000 cracks. Let it be broken. Let me be broken, without your hands trying to tape me back together so you can feel less guilty." "I never stopped loving you," Jungkook said suddenly. "I just never figured out how to love you without resenting myself for letting him go." Jimin's breath hitched, and for the first time his voice faltered. That's the most honest thing you've ever said. So where does that leave us? Jungkook asked, desperate, aching. Jimin looked at him, really looked, and for a moment there was no storm, no fire, no tears, just silence. Then he said, "It leaves us in the past where we belong. And maybe one day when we're not carrying the ghosts of each other, we can meet again. But right now, I need to live without your shadow." He walked away, letter still in his hand, hoodie pulled tight over his head. Jungkook didn't follow. This time he knew not to. Behind him, the city remained as loud and chaotic as ever, but inside him, everything had gone still. The award show night arrived like a storm cloaked in glitter. Red carpets, camera flashes, fans screaming from barricades, and yet beneath the surface, something far more volatile simmered. Jungkook adjusted the collar of his black suit in the backstage mirror, jaw tense, hands cold despite the heat of the lights. He had walked countless carpets before, accepted trophies with practiced smiles, but tonight was different. Tonight, Jimin and Taehyung would be there too. Not just present, but nominated in separate collaborations. 3 names once spoken in unison were now fractured across categories, headlines, and hearts. When the announcer called his name for a solo performance, the crowd erupted, but he couldn't hear it, only the deafening thud of his own pulse. He walked onto the stage under piercing lights, but the real spotlight wasn't above him. It was in the audience where Jimin sat stone-faced in the 3rd row, dressed in sharp navy silk, his gaze impassive. And behind him, 2 rows up, Taehyung leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked onto Jungkook like a challenge unspoken. The music started. Jungkook sang like a man unraveling. His voice trembled on notes meant to soar. When the final lyric, "Were never mine, but I still lost you," the silence before applause was longer than it should have been. And then it hit, roaring, endless, a sea of lights and noise that couldn't touch the rawness of what had just been laid bare. Backstage, he barely had time to catch his breath before Taehyung entered the dressing room, door clicking shut behind him. "You really sang that knowing we'd both hear it?" Asked, voice cool, almost amused. Jungkook turned, shoulders still rising and falling. "It wasn't for you." "Then who was it for?" Taehyung asked. "Because the entire internet's melting down trying to decode your heartbreak playlist." "It was for me," Jungkook replied. "I had to say it out loud before it buried me." "Too late for that," Taehyung muttered, leaning against the wall. "You buried both of us already." Jungkook looked at him, something sharp behind his eyes. "You came here just to say that?" "No," Taehyung said. "I came because I saw what you wrote on the letter, the one Jimin showed me." Jungkook tensed. "He had no right. He had every right," Taehyung cut in. "You dragged him into a war he never enlisted for." Jungkook's voice rose. "He wasn't dragged. He stayed. He kept choosing me." "Because he loved you," Taehyung snapped. "And you weaponized that love to avoid your own reflection. You think singing your guilt makes you honest. It makes you selfish." The door creaked again and both turned. Jimin stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Keep going," he said. "Don't stop now. You've already torn me apart. Might as well do it with an audience." "Jimin," Jungkook started, stepping forward, but Jimin held up a hand. I'm not here to beg for truth anymore. I'm here to give it." He walked into the room, closing the door behind him. "You both used me, maybe not maliciously, maybe not knowingly, but you did. Jungkook, you kissed me while your heart screamed someone else's name. Taehyung, you let me comfort him, knowing you were the ghost between us, and said nothing." "That's not fair," Taehyung said. "Isn't it?" Jimin snapped. "Because I've spent the last year watching you 2 orbit each other like a black hole, and every time I got close I was pulled in, swallowed. I was collateral. You made me a footnote in your tragedy." "You were never a footnote," Jungkook whispered. "You were the part I never deserved." "Exactly," Jimin said, eyes burning. "And now I finally believe it." Taehyung looked away, guilt flickering across his face. "So what now?" he asked. "We keep pretending this city isn't too small to avoid each other." "No," Jimin said, walking closer. "We stop pretending anything. I'm done pretending I'm okay. I'm done pretending I want forgiveness. I'm done pretending I didn't love both of you and hate myself for it." The room fell silent. Then Jimin turned to leave but paused. "Tonight I win something that isn't a trophy. I win the right to walk away clean. Don't try to follow." And he left, no theatrics, no tears, just silence so loud it crushed the air between Jungkook and Taehyung. The award show continued outside, flashing lights, staged laughter, confetti raining down like fake absolution. But inside that room, 3 hearts had shattered for the last time. The after-party pulsed with bass and artificial laughter, champagne flutes clinking like nothing had shattered backstage. But Jungkook stood at the edge of the crowd feeling like the room was closing in on him. He caught fragments of whispers, his lyrics, Jimin's radio words, Taehyung's sudden appearance, stitched together into rumors sharp enough to cut. When he turned, Jimin was there, not alone this time, flanked by a manager who quickly disappeared at the sight of Jungkook's expression. "You didn't have to come here," Jungkook said, voice tight. "I didn't," Jimin replied coolly. "I came to breathe. Turns out it's hard to do that when your past keeps grabbing your throat." Jungkook swallowed. "I'm trying to give you space." Jimin laughed without humor. "Space doesn't mean silence when the silence is screaming my name in your songs." Before Jungkook could answer, Taehyung stepped between them, a volatile calm radiating off him. "If we're going to tear this open again," he said, "let's stop pretending it's an accident." Jimin's eyes flashed. "You don't get to referee, you vanished when it mattered." "I vanished because staying would have destroyed us faster," Taehyung shot back. "And look where leaving got us." Jungkook's voice broke through sharp. "Stop talking like I wasn't there, like I didn't make choices. I chose wrong, okay? I chose fear. I chose not to decide and let both of you pay for it." Jimin stepped closer, the music thudding like a heartbeat behind his words. "Then decide now, not for me, for yourself. Say it out loud. Who do you want when there's no stage, no audience, no guilt to hide behind?" Jungkook's chest burned. He looked at Taehyung, memories colliding, first laughter, first secret, first goodbye, then at Jimin, whose eyes held a steadiness earned through pain. "I want peace," Jungkook said finally, voice trembling. "And I know I can't have it with either of you right now." Taehyung exhaled sharply. "That's a coward's answer." "No," Jimin said softly, surprising them both. "It's the first honest one." He turned to Jungkook close enough that only he could hear. "I loved you, I might always care, but I won't be your battlefield anymore." Jungkook nodded, tears threatening. "I'm sorry." "I know," Jimin said. "That's why I'm leaving." Taehyung stared at Jungkook, something final settling in his gaze. "You don't get absolution tonight," he said. "You get consequence." Then he stepped back, letting the crowd swallow him. Jimin lingered a moment longer, eyes steady, then walked away without looking back. The party roared on, oblivious, while Jungkook stood alone at the edge of the noise, realizing that the loudest thing in the room was the quiet he'd finally chosen. Lanjutkan episode Selanjutnya Dengan episode Yang Lebih Panjang. Lebih Binayak Perkapan Panas. Seru Tagging. Controversial. Kejatan dan emotional dan berikan saya narasi saja dalam bahasa Inggris tanpa menggunakan poin-poin, dan atandai setiap episode dan buatkan narasi tanpa enter. Episode 10 Morning came without mercy. Sunlight spilling through the curtains of Jungkook's apartment like an accusation he couldn't escape. His phone vibrating non-stop on the bedside table with messages he refused to open. Headlines screamed betrayal. Fans dissected glances frame by frame. And yet none of it compared to the hollow ache in his chest when he realized the silence from Jimin was real this time. He showered, dressed, moved like muscle memory alone kept him upright, and by noon he was summoned to a closed-door meeting that felt more like a trial. The room was cold, glass walls reflecting versions of himself he didn't recognize. "You need to address this," a manager said carefully. "Not the rumors, your behavior." Jungkook scoffed. "My behavior, your emotional volatility," another voice added. "The radio speech, the performance, the after-party confrontation, it's becoming a liability." Jungkook laughed, sharp and humorless. "So now heartbreak needs a press release." Before anyone could answer, the door opened. Jimin walked in. The room froze, his presence cut through the tension like a blade. "I asked to be here," Jimin said calmly. "If this conversation is about me, I'll speak for myself." Jungkook's heart slammed. "You didn't have to, I know," Jimin interrupted, eyes never leaving the executives. "But I'm done letting other people control the narrative of my pain." Of them cleared his throat. "We're concerned about the impact on the group." Jimin nodded. "So am I, that's why I'm saying this clearly on record. Jungkook didn't manipulate me, he didn't force me. I chose to love someone who wasn't ready to choose me back." Jungkook whispered his name, but Jimin didn't look at him. "And that doesn't make him a villain," Jimin continued. "It makes him human. The damage came from silence, not malice." A pause. "So what are you asking for?" someone asked. Jimin finally turned to Jungkook, eyes steady, resolute. "I'm asking for distance, real distance, separate schedules, no forced apologies, no public reconciliation arc. Let us heal like people, not characters." Room buzzed with unease. Jungkook stood abruptly. "If that's what you want," he said, voice tight, "say it to me, not them." Jimin met his gaze. "It's what I need." The words landed heavier than any insult. "Then say it," Jungkook pressed, stepping closer. "Say you're done with me." Jimin's voice softened but didn't waver. "I'm done waiting for you." Silence swallowed the room. Jungkook nodded once, a fracture running through his composure. "Okay." He turned to leave, but Taehyung's voice echoed from the doorway. "Running again?" Jungkook stopped. Taehyung stepped in, eyes fierce. "You don't get to disappear and call it growth. You don't get to let him take all the emotional risk." Jimin shook his head. "This isn't a fight you need to finish." "Maybe it is," Taehyung said, gaze locked on Jungkook. "Because until he hears this, he'll keep bleeding on everyone." Jungkook turned slowly. "Then say it," he said hoarsely. Taehyung inhaled. "I loved you, I still care, but I won't chase you into the dark anymore." Jungkook's breath hitched. Jimin added quietly, "Neither will I." Something finally broke. Jungkook closed his eyes, shoulders sagging, the fight draining out of him. "Then this is it," he said. "No more ghosts, no more placeholders." He opened his eyes, looking at both of them. "I'll do the work, alone." Jimin nodded once, a silent acknowledgement heavy with everything unsaid. Taehyung stepped back, giving space he should have given years ago. Jungkook walked out into the hallway, the door closing behind him with a final, echoing click. And for the first time, the pain didn't chase him. It stayed behind, with the choices he had finally stopped avoiding. The silence after Jungkook left the building wasn't peaceful. It was violent in its stillness, the kind that rang in Jimin's ears long after the door shut, and the meeting dissolved into murmurs. Jimin stood alone in the hallway, hands tucked into his coat pockets to keep them from shaking, breathing slow like he was teaching himself how to exist without bracing for someone else's collapse. Hours later, the city was already dark when he finally stepped outside, phone buzzing with messages he didn't open, fans gathering behind barriers shouting his name like nothing had fractured. He walked anyway, head down, until a familiar voice cut through the noise. "You look like you're trying not to fall apart." Jimin stopped. Taehyung stood a few steps away, coat collar pulled up, eyes tired but clear. "Don't," Jimin said quietly. "I don't have anything left for either of you tonight." Taehyung nodded, not offended. "I'm not here to ask for anything." "Then why are you here?" Jimin asked, finally looking at him. "Because you shouldn't have had to be the strongest person in the room," Taehyung replied. "And because I owe you an apology." Jimin let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "You're late." "I know," Taehyung said. "I was a coward. I saw what was happening and convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility. I told myself Jungkook would figure it out, that you were strong enough to handle it. That was selfish." Jimin's jaw tightened. "You both assumed I'd endure, that I'd adapt, that I'd keep loving quietly." "You shouldn't have had to," Taehyung said. "And for what it's worth, I never wanted you to be a placeholder. You were real. What you felt was real." Jimin's eyes burned. "That doesn't undo the damage." "No," Taehyung agreed, "but it names it." They walked a few steps together, the city humming around them, neon lights blurring in the corners of Jimin's vision. "He's going to try to change," Taehyung said after a moment. "I know." "He should," Jimin replied, "just not with me." Taehyung glanced at him. "You don't hate him." "No," Jimin said honestly. "That's the problem. Hate would be easier. I loved him, and loving someone who couldn't choose me taught me something I won't forget." "What's that?" "That love without presence is just another form of abandonment," Jimin said, "and I won't accept it again." They stopped at the curb where their paths split. Taehyung hesitated. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "you were never invisible. He just wasn't capable of seeing clearly." Jimin met his gaze, steady now. "I don't need to be seen by him anymore." Taehyung nodded, a quiet understanding settling between them. Jimin turned and walked away, steps firm, chest lighter than it had been in months, not because the pain was gone, but because it finally belonged only to him. Somewhere across the city, Jungkook sat alone in his apartment, lights off, phone face down, breathing through the ache without reaching for anyone to save him. And for the first time, all three of them were exactly where they needed to be. Not healed, not whole, but honest. Lanjutkan episode selanjutnya dengan episode yang lebih panjang. Lebih banyak perkapan panas. Seru tagging, controversial. Kejutan dan emotional dan berikan saya narasi saja dalam bahasa Inggris tanpa menggunakan poin-poin, dan atandai setiap episode dan buatkan narasi tanpa enter. Episode 12. The first public schedule after the separation was supposed to be routine, controlled, sanitized. But tension bled through the seams the moment Jungkook stepped into the live broadcast studio and realized Jimin was already seated across the table, posture straight, expression calm in a way that felt rehearsed and dangerous. Cameras rolled, red lights blinked on, and the host smiled too brightly, unaware, or pretending to be, that the air between them was charged enough to spark. "It's great to have you both here," the host said cheerfully. "Fans have been curious about how you're doing after such a busy awards season." Jungkook felt his pulse spike. Jimin answered first, voice smooth. "Busy doesn't begin to cover it. Some seasons don't end when the schedule does." Jungkook glanced at him, caught off guard. The host laughed nervously. "Well, you both look well." "Looking well and being well are very different things," Jimin replied, eyes never leaving the camera. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "Forward, we're professionals, we handle things." Jimin turned to him then, slowly, deliberately. "Do we?" The host froze for half a second before scrambling. "Let's talk about your new music." "No," Jimin said gently but firmly. "Let's not pretend this is just about music." A murmur rippled through the control room. Jungkook's voice dropped. "This isn't the place." "You're right," Jimin said. "It should have been handled privately, but some people only hear the truth when it's said out loud." Jungkook's eyes burned. "You promised distance." "I promised not to wait," Jimin replied. "There's a difference." The host tried to interject, sweat beading at his temple. "Maybe we can. You asked how we're doing," Jimin continued, addressing the camera. "I'm doing better now that I stopped translating someone else's silence into hope." Jungkook inhaled sharply. "You're turning this into something it doesn't need to be." Jimin's smile was thin. "It already was. I'm just numbing it." A producer's frantic gestures went ignored as the room leaned into the moment. Jungkook stood abruptly. "You want honesty," he said, voice shaking but loud. "Fine, I failed you, I failed myself. I hid behind ambiguity because choosing felt like betrayal no matter which way I turned." Jimin rose too, matching his intensity. "And I let myself be an option because I was afraid that asking to be chosen would make me alone." The studio was silent, breath held. Jungkook looked at him, eyes glassy. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Intention doesn't erase impact," Jimin said, "but accountability can change the ending." The host finally cut in, voice trembling. "We're going to take a break." "One more thing," Jimin said, lifting a hand. "To anyone watching who's ever waited for someone to love them back the right way, don't make a home out of someone else's confusion." Jungkook swallowed hard. "And to anyone who's been afraid to choose," he added quietly, "choose yourself before you cost someone their sense of worth." The red light clicked off. Chaos erupted behind the cameras, voices overlapping, but Jimin and Jungkook stood there, facing each other without shields for the first time. Jimin exhaled. "I didn't do that to hurt you." Jungkook nodded, tears finally slipping. "I know, you did it to stop hurting." They didn't touch. They didn't apologize again. They simply stepped back, separate, grounded. The truth finally aired without cruelty, without denial, leaving behind a scorched honesty that hurt, but healed more than silence ever could.